Commercial versus homemade snow melting agents and how they affect plants and soil. Table of contents. So first I'll be touching about what my project exactly is in my project overview. Then I'll be moving on to my hypothesis, my procedure, my observations and test results, the comparing and contrasting of these observations and test results, and then my final conclusion. With the project overview. My project is all about observing how 4 different snow melting agents affect snow-covered plants and their soil. At the end of the study, I'll be comparing and contrasting the test results from these 4 snow melting agents in the following 2 ways: how they affected the plants and how fast they melted the snow. My hypothesis. I tested the following 4 snow melting agents: 2 types of road salts, a mixture of water, rubbing alcohol, and dish soap, and a mixture of sand and coffee grounds. So I hypothesized that the 2 road salts would have the most harmful environmental impact, as everyone knows that chemicals are bad for the environment. And what are the salts made of except chemicals? Now, following this line of thought, I hypothesized that the sand and coffee ground mixture would have the least harmful environmental impact, since the water, rubbing alcohol, and dish soap mixture has more chemicals than the sand and coffee ground mixture as well. On to my process. The first step to completing the study was to gather all the materials needed. These materials included 5 plants and a soil testing kit. After this, I tested each plant's soil for pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash levels. Now, once all of this was done, I could start my study. To do this, I added a generous amount of snow to each plant, and then I introduced a unique snow melting agent to each plant, leaving one aside. This empty plant would be my control. Next, I observed each plant's height and coloration for the next 4 days, and I made notes in my observation journal. After this, I compared and I tested each plant for pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash levels again, and I compared and contrasted the notes from my observation journal and from the test results. This is how I set my project up. Observations and test results. All of day 1 was spent testing the plant's soil. As you can see, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash levels of the soil was generally high, and the average pH level was about 6.0. 6.0 is slightly acidic, which is not very good, but it's not very bad either. Day 2, 3, 4, and 5 were all spent recording the plant's heights and coloration. On day 2, I also noted the snow melting speeds. As you can see, the snow in plant 2 and 3 melted the fastest. These are some photos I took on day 2. These are my day 3, 4, and 5 observations. Now, day 6 was spent testing the plant's soils once more. As you can see, the nitrogen and phosphorus levels stayed generally the same, but the potash levels went down a bit. The pH levels increased and decreased for some plants, but overall it stayed close to where it was before. These are the photos I took on day 6. Compare and contrast. Let's first talk about the changes in height of each plant. This is a graph I made depicting the deterioration of each plant. The main thing that happened was that plants 2 and 3, which had the salts used on them, they shrunk the most. Let's talk about the differences in the pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash levels. The main things that happened here was that the potash levels went down for all the plants, which is pretty worrisome. Image comparisons. The before images were taken on day 2, and the after images were taken on day 6. The main things to notice here is that plants 2 and 3 became shorter, more drooped, slightly discolored, and less vibrant. the other planes didn't have any noticeable differences visually. Now, in the snow melting speed comparison, really only one major thing happened. The salts melted the snow the fastest. The rubbing alcohol solution melted the snow the second fastest, and the sand and coffee ground mixture and the snow in the control plant, they melted the slowest. The conclusion. Why don't we start with the hypothesis review? My hypothesis was right in one place and wrong in another. I was right in hypothesizing that the salts would have the most harmful environmental impact. The plants became less healthy, discolored, shorter, and less vibrant. The other plants didn't. Now, I was wrong in hypothesizing that the sand and coffee grounds mixture would have the least harmful environmental impact. It was actually the rubbing alcohol solution that had the least harmful impact. Leaving the environmental impact to the side, let's count in the snow melting speed factor. Now, the salts did melt the snow the fastest, but it's not really worth it if you're going to have such a big environmental impact. The rubbing alcohol solution melted the snow the second fastest, meaning that it's definitely the pick, as it doesn't have a large environmental impact, and it melts snow faster than if you leave the snow on its own. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.